One of the most frustrating, dare I say, most gaslighting components of the pandemic conversation right now is the shifting of the goalposts that has been going on since this all began, and the things our politicians say, public health officials, and those quote-unquote experts who are really big advocates of big lockdowns. You know the old joke, we're now almost a year into 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Now, I think there's one aspect where we should not accept the shifting of goalposts, and that's when it comes to the vaccines and what percentage of people supposedly need to be vaccinated before you can say, all right, all these onerous restrictions on our lives, enough. We don't need them anymore. So what am I talking about here? Well, we hear from people like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that everybody who wants a vaccine will have access to it by September. Okay, that's great because anybody who wants it should be allowed to get it. And then there's people talking about the percentage needed to get, herd immunity and so forth, 80%, this or that percent and so forth. Okay, that's a part of the conversation as well, but let's talk about the number who need to be vaccinated before we can acknowledge we no longer have this 5-alarm fire on our hands. I think the number in Ontario, we got to talk about this province by province because, well, that's where these things are playing out. In Ontario, the number is about 150,000. You go, wow, Furey, that's a pretty low number. Where do you get that from? Because that is the number of people who are living in long-term care facilities and the staff members in those facilities. Now, Ontario has rightly prioritized those people getting the vaccine first, and they had committed to a deadline of January 21st to roll out those vaccinations. So on any given day when we announce the people who have tragically died of coronavirus, the majority of them are usually long-term care residents. In fact, on some days, like the day Doug Ford announced the province-wide lockdown back on December 18th, all of them, all 17 of them, were long-term care residents. So you vaccinate that entire population, that group of people in the long-term care system, and well, that's it. That's the majority of people who are dying of all of this. So if we are going to accept some of these more ridiculous restrictions on low-risk persons' activities in society beyond January 21st, you gotta say, why? What on earth is going on here? Now, the government may shift the goalposts and say, well, did you know there are still, people in their 50s, people in their 60s walking out and about who could have a serious outcome from this, and some have died, not many, nowhere near as many in the post-80 category and so forth. And you go, okay, fair enough, so let's take precautions for them and let's warn them about the risks out there. What does that have to do with low-risk people out there going to a boutique clothing store, a bookstore, going out on a skating rink and not, for heavens, getting tasered, as we've seen in some videos? So that's really what we have to watch, and that's where the conversation has to be at now. Who are the people who are most at risk of dying of this, of having serious outcomes, of being hospitalized? Let's vaccinate them. And then after that happens, I'm sorry, what is the justification for any of this? And why should we accept any of it? That's where the conversations have to head, and I think that's the pressure that folks have to put on their government officials.